The train from Paris had been running late since Lyon, and our entomologist, let us not burden him with a name, for he could be any man of science in that spring of 1894, pressed his forehead against the compartment window, watching Provence unfold like a botanical illustration. The lavender wasn't yet in bloom, but the fields stretched in neat geometric rows, their gray-green bushes promising purple abundance come July. He thought, as men of his disposition often do, that insects understood the world better than humans. They knew exactly when to arrive, when to feed, when to mate, when to die. No delays, no uncertainties. "Chateau Lavande, monsieur," the station master announced, though our traveler was the only passenger disembarking at this remote stop. The April sun hung low, casting long shadows across the platform. A single horse cart waited, its driver, weathered as old leather, barely glancing up from his pipe. The journey to the chateau took them through narrow roads bordered by plane trees, their mottled bark reminding him of the wing patterns on certain nocturnal moths. Strange how his mind always returned to his work. Perhaps it was easier than remembering other things, his empty apartment in Paris, the silence where conversation once lived. 2 years now since Marie had died, and still he found himself cataloging the world as if preparing to describe it to her later. Chateau Lavande emerged from behind a grove of olive trees, its pale limestone walls glowing amber in the evening light. Not as grand as some estates he'd visited for similar work, but substantial enough to speak of old money, the kind that came from controlling what people needed. In this case, the essence of lavender for perfumes that graced Parisian salons. The driver helped him with his cases, 1 for clothing, 2 for his instruments and reference books. Monsieur Auguste Beaumont stood in the entrance hall like a general reviewing troops. 59 years of living had carved deep lines around his eyes, but his posture remained military straight. "You're late," he observed, though not unkindly. "The trains, yes, I know. They promise modern efficiency, but deliver medieval punctuality." Our entomologist smiled slightly. "Insects are more reliable, monsieur. A butterfly emerging from its chrysalis never misses its appointment." "Indeed," Beaumont's expression softened marginally. "My brother would have appreciated that observation. Come, let me show you his collection before dinner. I confess I don't understand his passion, but I'm told it's significant." They walked through corridors lined with portraits of stern ancestors, past furniture that exhaled the musty breath of decades. The collection room occupied the entire 3rd floor of the West Wing, its windows facing north to prevent direct sunlight from fading the specimens. Our entomologist's breath caught slightly. Row upon row of mahogany cases, each with glass tops, each containing dozens of mounted butterflies and moths. The dying light through the windows made their wings shimmer. "Magnificent," he murmured, approaching the nearest case. "Morpho butterflies from South America, their wings like fragments of tropical sky." "Your brother traveled extensively?" "He spent 20 years in Indochina, military service, then colonial administration. The butterflies were an obsession." Beaumont's tone suggested he found such passions frivolous. "There are nearly 3,000 specimens. I need them properly catalogued for insurance purposes, and perhaps for donation to the Natural History Museum in Marseille." As our entomologist examined the cases, noting the meticulous labels in fading ink, Beaumont cleared his throat. "I should mention, the household is somewhat disrupted at present. My daughter Celeste has been ill since March." "Nothing contagious," he added quickly, "but it has everyone on edge. The servants, particularly. They blame it on some nonsense about moths." Moths? Our entomologist looked up from a case containing Asian swallowtails. Local superstition. Lunar moths, they call them, white things that appear at night. The servants claim they steal breath or souls or some such medieval rubbish. They've been seen at my daughter's window. Beaumont's jaw tightened. I'd dismiss it entirely, but Celeste does seem worse after nights when they appear. Dr. Reynaud is baffled. The entomologist's mind, trained to find patterns where others saw chaos, began its quiet work. But he only said, I shall try not to add to the household disruption. His room was on the second floor, comfortable but modest, the quarters of a valued specialist but not a social equal. From his window he could see the lavender fields stretching toward the darkening mountains. Dinner was announced by a gong that seemed to echo forever through the stone corridors. The dining room intimidated through sheer scale rather than opulence. Besides Beaumont and himself, only two others joined them. Dr. Reynaud, a man who wore his 62 years like a comfortable coat, and Madame Thérèse Moreau, introduced as Celeste's companion. She was 45, perhaps, with the kind of severe prettiness that suggested beauty subdued by circumstance. Her dark dress and tightly pinned hair spoke of someone who had learned to make herself indispensable through being unobtrusive. Mademoiselle Celeste won't be joining us, Madame Moreau announced, though no one had asked. She needs her rest. The conversation circled carefully around the illness. Dr. Reynaud described symptoms: weakness, pallor, lack of appetite, disturbed sleep, while avoiding any definitive diagnosis. Madame Moreau mentioned her herbal tisanes, her careful nursing, her devotion to her charge. 20 years she'd been with the family, since Celeste was an infant. That first night in Chateau Lavande, our entomologist lay awake listening to the unfamiliar symphony of the house. Timbers settling, wind testing shutters, somewhere a clock marking hours with bronze authority. At midnight, he heard footsteps in the corridor, quick and light. Rising, he peered through a crack in his door to see Marie, the young housemaid, hurrying past with a candle, her face tight with worry. Morning brought clarity and strong coffee. The breakfast room faced east, flooded with light that made the silver gleam aggressively. Our entomologist had barely settled with his cup when the door opened and Mademoiselle Celeste entered, supported by Madame Moreau. The young woman, 21, her father had mentioned, moved like someone walking underwater. Everything about her seemed muted. Her pale blue dress hung loose. Her blonde hair lacked luster. Even her smile seemed an effort. Yet beneath the illness, one could see she had been vibrant. Would be again, perhaps, if whatever drained her could be stopped. Papa says you study butterflies, she offered, settling carefully into a chair while Madame Moreau fussed with cushions. I used to paint them in the garden. Used to? Our entomologist asked gently. I haven't the strength to hold a brush steady anymore. She lifted her hand, demonstrating a subtle tremor. Madame Moreau says I'll improve with rest. Of course you will, ma chérie, the governess interjected quickly. Now you mustn't tire yourself with conversation. Dr. Reynaud says many things, Celeste interrupted with surprising spirit, then immediately seemed exhausted by her small rebellion. Forgive me. The nights have been difficult. The moths? Our entomologist ventured. Both women looked at him sharply. Madame Moreau's expression turned disapproving. You shouldn't encourage such fancies, monsieur. Mademoiselle needs rational care, not folklore. Yet Celeste leaned forward slightly. You don't think I'm imagining them? "I think," he said carefully, "that in nature everything has an explanation. If moths appear at your window, there's a reason. Finding it might help everyone sleep better." After breakfast, he immersed himself in the collection, as much to process what he'd observed as to begin his work. The cases were arranged chronologically, charting the late Beaumont brothers' travels through Asia. Our entomologist noticed something curious. Among the exotic specimens were several local species, including a case labeled Nocturnal Lepidoptera Provence. His pulse quickened slightly as he opened it. There they were, 6 specimens of what the locals called lunar moths. Properly, they were a variation of Actias dubernardi, typically found in China. But these showed adaptations suggesting they'd established themselves locally. Their wings were impossibly white, almost translucent, with eye spots that seemed to watch the observer. The label, in fading brown ink, read, "Collected near Chateau Lavande, August 1873. Notable, extreme attraction to specific aromatic compounds." Old Jacques, the groundskeeper, found him there in late afternoon, studying the moths through his magnifying glass. The elderly man, 71 years of bent backs and sun-weathered wisdom, entered with the peculiar authority of servants who've outlasted several generations of masters. "Those are them," Jacques said without preamble, pointing a gnarled finger at the case. "The breath stealers. My grandmother knew about them. Said they came with traders from the East, hidden in bolts of silk." Our entomologist looked up. "When did you first see them here?" "Always been here, long as I remember. But they come and go. Some years, none, then suddenly dozens." Jacques lowered his voice. "They started appearing at Mademoiselle's window in March, right when she took ill. Every night they grow worse, a few at first, now sometimes 20 or 30, all pressed against the glass like they're trying to get in." "Has anyone thought to simply close the shutters?" The old man snorted. "Madame Moreau insists fresh air is essential for recovery, says the room mustn't be stuffy. She's very particular about Mademoiselle's care." That evening, our entomologist positioned himself strategically. His room was at the corner of the building. From his window, he could see the approach to Celeste's chambers. As darkness fell, he waited, patient as a hunter. The house settled into its nighttime rhythms, servants retiring, doors closing, the last candles extinguished. At precisely 11 o'clock, they came. First 1, then 3, then a dozen, their white wings catching moonlight as they flew directly to one particular window. They didn't flutter randomly like moths drawn to flame. Instead, they landed deliberately, arranged themselves almost decoratively across the glass. Our entomologist grabbed his notebook, sketching their positions, noting their behavior. They seemed almost intoxicated, their movements languid, purposeful. A door opened below. Madame Moreau emerged onto the terrace, looking up at Celeste's window. Even from his position, our entomologist could see her satisfied nod before she returned inside. Curious behavior for someone who claimed not to believe in folklore. The next morning brought new information. Henri Durand arrived for his twice-weekly visit, a young man of 26 whose modern collar and anxious energy marked him as someone caught between tradition and progress. Our entomologist encountered him in the hallway outside Celeste's room, where Madame Moreau had just denied him entry. "She needs complete rest," the governess stated firmly. "Dr. Raynaud's orders." "Dr. Raynaud is a fool," Henri burst out, then colored at his outburst. "Forgive me, but it's been 2 months. The wedding is supposed to be in July. How can she recover if you truly care for Mademoiselle's well-being," Madame Moreau interrupted coldly, "you'll allow those who've cared for her since childhood to manage her recovery." After she swept away, Henri stood dejected. Our entomologist approached carefully. "You seem concerned about more than postponed nuptials." The younger man studied him, perhaps recognizing a potential ally. "Each week she's worse, weaker, more distant. It's as if something is slowly erasing her." The cataloging work demanded precision, and our entomologist found comfort in its methodical nature. Each specimen required examination, identification, and careful notation. By his third day at Chateau Lavande, he'd established a routine. Mornings in the collection room, afternoons verifying species in his reference books, evenings observing the household's peculiar rhythms. The collection revealed stories within stories. The late Beaumont brother had been more than an amateur collector. His notes, tucked behind specimens, showed genuine scientific inquiry. One particular journal, discovered wedged behind a case of Vietnamese butterflies, contained detailed observations about alkaloid compounds in plants and their effects on Lepidoptera behavior. Our entomologist read with growing interest. Certain moths of the Actius genus show remarkable sensitivity to specific plant alkaloids. Unlike typical phototaxis, they navigate by chemical signals, able to detect concentrations as low as several parts per million. A commotion in the courtyard drew him to the window. Henri Durand had arrived for his visit earlier than usual and was arguing with Madame Moreau at the entrance. Their words didn't carry, but the young man's gestures spoke of frustration. Finally, Monsieur Beaumont himself emerged, and after a brief conference, Henri was admitted. Our entomologist returned to his work, but found concentration difficult. The pieces of this household puzzle refused to align properly. Why would Madame Moreau restrict access to her charge so severely? Dedication to duty, perhaps, but it seemed excessive even for a governess of the old school. That afternoon, while searching for a particular reference book in the library, he encountered Dr. Renaud. The physician sat slumped in a leather chair, staring at a medical journal without reading it. "Ah, monsieur," the doctor said, looking up with weary eyes. "Tell me, in your profession, do you ever encounter phenomena that defy classification?" "Occasionally." "Usually, it means we're looking at the problem incorrectly." Renaud laughed bitterly. 62 years of medicine, and this girl's illness mocks me. The symptoms suggest several conditions, but match none completely. Anemia, but her blood appears normal. Nervous exhaustion, but she's had no shock or strain. Wasting disease, but no fever or infection. What remedies have you tried? Everything within reason. Iron tonics, quinine, rest cures. Madame Moreau supplements with her herbal preparations. She has quite a knowledge of traditional remedies. Been studying them since she was young, she says. Her family were apothecaries before. He trailed off, perhaps feeling he'd said too much about another's history. Our entomologist filed this information away. The lunar moths. Have you considered they might be a symptom rather than a cause? The doctor's eyebrows rose. How do you mean? In nature, certain insects are attracted to specific chemical signals. If the moths consistently appear at Mademoiselle's window, perhaps something there draws them. Interesting theory, but what could it be? We've changed everything. Bedding, curtains, even the window glass itself at considerable expense. Later, our entomologist managed what he'd been attempting for days, a closer examination of Celeste's quarters, under the pretense of checking for moths that might have entered through gaps. Madame Moreau watched him like a hawk guards its nest, but she couldn't object to scientific thoroughness. The room spoke of a life interrupted. An easel stood by the window with an unfinished watercolor of the garden, the brushstrokes growing increasingly unsteady toward the bottom. Books lay scattered, novels, poetry, a guide to painting techniques. On the mantelpiece, a photograph showed Celeste with a middle-aged couple, presumably at Henri's family vineyard, everyone smiling with the easy confidence of prosperity. As he examined the window frame for gaps, our entomologist detected something subtle, a faint, almost sweet smell, like almonds mixed with something floral. It was strongest near the bed, particularly around the pillows. When he bent closer to investigate, Madame Moreau intervened sharply. "Monsieur, surely you're not suggesting the moths are hiding in Mademoiselle's bedding?" "Simply being thorough, Madame. Science demands we examine all possibilities." Her dark eyes narrowed slightly. "Science, yes. Men always believe science has all the answers. Sometimes, monsieur, simple care and devotion work better than all your modern theories." That evening, Henri joined them for dinner, his presence changing the household's dynamics noticeably. At 26, he represented everything Monsieur Beaumont seemed to distrust about the younger generation. Talk of labor reforms, new agricultural methods, sympathy for Republican ideals. Yet Beaumont tolerated him for Celeste's sake, and perhaps because the Durand vineyards were among the region's most profitable. "We should take her to Paris," Henri suggested boldly over the soup course. "The doctors there have new treatments, modern facilities." "Absolutely not," Madame Moreau responded before Beaumont could speak. "Moving her in this condition would be dangerous. She needs familiar surroundings, consistent care." "What she needs," Henri said with barely controlled anger, "is to recover. 2 months of your consistent care haven't achieved that." The tension crackled like static before a storm. Beaumont finally spoke, his voice carrying paternal authority. "We will continue with the current treatment for another month. If there's no improvement, we'll consider alternatives." Our entomologist observed this exchange while maintaining the neutral expression of someone outside family disputes. Yet his mind was working, connecting observations like specimens in a collection. The sweet smell in Celeste's room, the moth's precise timing, Madame Moreau's fierce gatekeeping, the doctor's frustration with symptoms that shouldn't exist together. After dinner, he returned to the collection room, drawing to the journal he'd found earlier. By lamplight, he read more of the deceased Beaumont's notes. The Actius dubernardi I discovered near the chateau show remarkable behavioral modifications. Unlike their Chinese cousins who navigate by moonlight, these specimens respond primarily to chemical attractants. Most fascinating is their response to compounds found in datura plants. They become almost drunk on the alkaloids. The decision to conduct proper nocturnal observations required preparation. Our entomologist spent the day assembling his tools, a dark lantern with adjustable shutters, his field notebook wrapped in oiled cloth to muffle page turning, a pocket watch with luminous hands, and, most importantly, small glass vials for collecting samples. If the moths were responding to chemical signals, he needed to understand what drew them with such clockwork precision. He chose his observation post carefully, Not his own window, which offered too oblique an angle, but the servants' staircase that ran along the exterior wall. It had a small landing with a narrow window, providing a direct view of Celeste's chambers. The servants retired early, and the staircase would be deserted after 9 o'clock. As he waited for darkness, our entomologist reflected on patterns within patterns. His late wife Marie had once said he saw the world like a vast collection, everything labeled and pinned in place. But living things don't stay still, she'd reminded him gently. They change, adapt, surprise us. 2 years since tuberculosis took her, and he still found himself collecting observations to share with her ghost. At 10:30, he positioned himself on the landing. The spring night was mild, the air carrying scents of wild thyme and distant lavender fields. Through his window, he could see Celeste's room, where a single candle flickered. Madame Moreau's silhouette moved across the curtains, adjusting pillows, arranging something on the nightstand, her movements ritualistic in their precision. 11 o'clock approached. Our entomologist held his breath as the first moth appeared, white against the darkness like a piece of moonlight given form. Then came others, emerging from the garden shadows, flying directly to their target without the typical spiraling flight of confused insects. By 11:15, exactly 17 moths pressed against Celeste's window, their wings creating a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. He sketched quickly, noting their positions, their size variations, the way they pulsed against the glass in slow rhythm. Through his field glasses, he could see their antennae moving constantly, sampling the air. Whatever attracted them was powerful enough to override their normal nocturnal behavior. A door opened below. Our entomologist pressed himself deeper into shadow as Madame Moreau stepped onto the terrace. She carried something, a small bottle that caught the moonlight. She looked up at the moth-covered window with an expression he couldn't quite read from his position. Satisfaction? Concern? Calculation? After a moment, she returned inside. The moths remained until nearly 1 in the morning, when they departed as suddenly as they'd arrived, dispersing into the night like dreams at dawn. Our entomologist waited another hour, ensuring the house was truly asleep, then crept down to investigate the terrace. The flagstones were cold under his feet. He moved carefully to the spot where Madame Moreau had stood, kneeling to examine the ground. There, a single drop of liquid on the stone, still damp. He collected it carefully with a glass slide from his kit. It had the same sweet, almond-like scent he'd detected in Celeste's room. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Marie, the housemaid, approached him while he worked in the collection room, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Monsieur," she whispered, "you study the moths, yes? The white devils?" He nodded encouragingly, setting down his magnifying glass. "My grandmother, she knows things, old things. She says those moths, they don't come for souls. They come for poison, like bees to flowers, but for bad things instead of good." "Poison?" Our entomologist kept his voice neutral, but his pulse quickened. "She says in the old days, before the revolution, when someone wanted to," Marie struggled for words, "to keep someone weak but not dead, they used plants that called the white moths. The moths were the sign, you see, that someone was being," she made a gesture suggesting something gradual, insidious. Before he could question her further, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Marie fled like a startled sparrow, leaving our entomologist with racing thoughts. He returned to the deceased Beaumont's journal, searching for more references to plant alkaloids. There, a passage he'd overlooked. The Datura genus, particularly Stramonium, produces tropane alkaloids that, in small doses, cause weakness, confusion, and tremors. Fascinating that our local moths can detect concentrations invisible to human senses. That afternoon he encountered Celeste in the garden, a rare occurrence. She sat on a bench, wrapped in shawls despite the warm sun, while Madame Moreau hovered nearby. The young woman's decline was more visible in daylight. Hollowed cheeks, trembling hands, a gaze that struggled to focus. "The moths didn't come last night," she said suddenly, looking at our entomologist. "For the first time in weeks, I actually slept." Madame Moreau's expression tightened. "You must have been dreaming, ma chérie. I checked your window myself at midnight. They were there as always." "No," Celeste insisted with surprising firmness. "I woke several times. The window was clear." She turned back to our entomologist. "Isn't that strange, that they should suddenly stop?" He chose his words carefully. "Nature often provides clues if we're observant. Perhaps something in their environment changed." "Nothing has changed," Madame Moreau interjected sharply. "Come, Celeste, you need your afternoon rest." As she led her charge away, the governess shot our entomologist a look that might have been warning or evaluation. He understood then that she knew he'd been watching. The game between them had shifted from hidden to acknowledged, though still unspoken. That evening, Henri arrived unexpectedly, dusty from hard riding. He found our entomologist in the library. "I've been to Marseille," he announced, without preamble, "consulting with doctors there. They've never heard of symptoms like Celeste's occurring naturally. One physician suggested someone might be causing them deliberately." The greenhouse stood at the far edge of the estate, half hidden behind a wall of cypress trees. Our entomologist had noticed it during his walks, but hadn't investigated until now, his fourth day of observations having suggested the answer might lie not with the moths, but with what drew them. The morning sun filtered through clouded glass panels, creating a humid twilight within. The door opened with a prolonged creak. Inside, the air hung thick and sweet, almost medicinal. Rows of plants stretched back into green shadows, some common to Provence, others decidedly exotic. Our entomologist moved slowly, identifying species with the automatic precision of his training. Lavender, of course, and rosemary, sage, various medicinal herbs. But toward the back, the collection grew more unusual. There, among specimens that belonged in colonial hothouses rather than provincial estates, he found what he'd suspected: several varieties of datura, their trumpet-shaped flowers pale and innocent-looking. Beside them grew other members of the nightshade family, belladonna, henbane, each beautiful and toxic in their own way. The plants were well tended, their soil recently watered, dead leaves carefully removed. "Magnificent specimens," a voice said behind him. Our entomologist turned to find Madame Moreau in the doorway, her dark dress making her seem part of the shadows. She moved forward with the confidence of someone on familiar ground. "You know these plants?" he asked carefully. "My family were apothecaries for 3 generations," she replied, touching a datura leaf with practiced gentleness. "Before the troubles before circumstances changed. These were gifts from Monsieur Beaumont's late brother. He knew of my interest in medicinal botany. Medicinal? Our entomologist repeated. Yet many of these are quite toxic. She smiled slightly, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. The difference between medicine and poison is merely dosage, wouldn't you agree? Digitalis from foxglove saves hearts or stops them. Morphine from poppies eases pain or ends life. Knowledge lies in understanding the balance. And you prepare remedies from these? Traditional tisanes, nothing more. For Celeste's nerves, for the servants' various complaints. Dr. Reynaud approves. He's quite progressive about combining old wisdom with new medicine. Our entomologist bent to examine the datura more closely. The leaves showed signs of recent harvesting. Clean cuts with sharp scissors, systematic removal from different plants to avoid depleting any single specimen. The alkaloids in these plants, he ventured, they have interesting properties. You're well informed for someone who studies insects. Insects and plants are intimately connected. One can't understand one without the other. He straightened, meeting her gaze directly. These particular alkaloids, for instance, attract certain moth species. The insects detect them at extremely low concentrations. Something flickered in her expression, surprise perhaps, or calculation. How fascinating! Nature's interconnections never cease to amaze. She moved past him to adjust a climbing vine. I must return to Celeste. She needs her morning preparations. After she left, our entomologist carefully collected several leaf samples, wrapping them in paper. The greenhouse held other secrets. A distillation apparatus in the corner, shelves of dried herbs in labeled jars, mortar and pestle sets stained with use. This was more than a casual interest in botany. It was a sophisticated operation. Returning to the chateau, he encountered old Jacques transplanting seedlings near the kitchen garden. The groundskeeper looked up, his ancient face creased with concern. "You've been to the poison garden, then," Jacques said quietly, using the old name for such medicinal collections. "Madame Moreau maintains it, guards it, makes her potions there." The old man lowered his voice further. "Started just after the young mistress got engaged. Said she needed stronger remedies for various household ailments. We've all been sleeping better, she says, with her new tisanes." Our entomologist felt the pieces clicking together like specimens in their proper cases. "Everyone drinks these tisanes. Everyone but her. Says she doesn't need them. Strong constitution from her peasant stock." Jacques spat to the side. "Peasant stock? Her family owned 3 apothecary shops in Avignon before the crash of '73. That afternoon brought a stroke of fortune. Monsieur Beaumont summoned our entomologist to his study, wanting a progress report on the cataloging. While they discussed the collection's surprising value, Beaumont revealed something crucial. "I must thank you for your discretion," he said, pouring cognac, though it was barely past 3. "This household situation, Celeste's illness, it's been trying, especially with the wedding arrangements." "The wedding proceeds?" Beaumont sighed heavily. "If she recovers, yes. July 15th was the date, all arranged. Henri's family is eager. The combination of our lands would create the largest estate in the region. But if Celeste remains invalid," he trailed off, then added quietly, "Madame Moreau has suggested we might need to reconsider. She says Celeste might never be strong enough for marriage, for children. that perhaps a quiet life here, under careful supervision, would be kinder. And Madame Moreau would provide this supervision? Who else? She's devoted her life to Celeste. Never married, no family left after their financial ruin. Where would she go if... He stopped, seeming to realize he'd said too much. Well, we must hope for recovery. That evening, our entomologist positioned himself again at his observation post. This time he watched not for moths, but for human activity. At 10:45, he saw Madame Moreau enter Celeste's room carrying a tray. Through the curtains he observed her moving about, adjusting pillows, smoothing bedding. Then she did something peculiar. She took what appeared to be a small atomizer and sprayed something around the bed, particularly on the pillows. At 11 precisely, the moths arrived. The laboratory our entomologist improvised in his room would have amused his colleagues at the university. A washstand converted to a workbench, hotel courtesy glasses serving as beakers, his traveling microscope balanced on stack of books. But science, he'd learned, was less about equipment than observation and method. The leaf samples from the greenhouse lay arranged like evidence at a trial. He worked through the night, using techniques learned during his doctoral studies. The datura leaves, when crushed and treated with basic reagents from his field kit, released their alkaloid essence. Diluted in water, the solution carried that distinctive, sweet almond scent he'd detected in Celeste's room. More importantly, when he placed a drop on paper and positioned it near his window, 3 moths arrived within minutes, drawn from the darkness like iron filings to a magnet. Dawn found him exhausted but certain. The mechanism was elegant in its simplicity. Regular applications of diluted datura extract to Celeste's bedding would cause gradual poisoning, weakness, tremors, confusion, all her symptoms. The moths, attracted by the alkaloids, became unwitting accomplices, their presence reinforcing superstitious fears and deflecting suspicion from the true cause. At breakfast, he studied Madame Moreau across the table. She appeared composed, as always, discussing household matters with the efficiency of long practice. Yet when their eyes met, he detected something new, a wariness, perhaps even fear. "You look tired, monsieur," she observed. "These old houses can disturb one's sleep. Perhaps you'd benefit from one of my tisanes? I prepare them fresh each evening." "Thank you, but I sleep well enough. The insect world often requires nocturnal observation." Dr. Reynaud joined them, looking more frustrated than ever. Another difficult night for our patient. The tremors were worse, and she complained of visual disturbances, seeing halos around lights. "I've searched every medical text, but the combination of symptoms remains inexplicable." Our entomologist chose his moment carefully. "Doctor, in your experience, what natural substances might cause such symptoms?" The physician considered. "Various plants, certainly. Digitalis affects vision. Belladonna causes confusion. Datura..." He paused, frowning. "But the doses would need to be significant, and we'd see acute poisoning, not this gradual decline." "Unless," our entomologist suggested quietly, "the doses were very small, administered regularly over time." The silence that followed felt heavy as summer air before a storm. Madame Moreau set down her teacup with exaggerated care. "Surely, monsieur, you're not suggesting someone is deliberately harming mademoiselle?" "I'm suggesting that science demands we consider all possibilities." That afternoon he found an unexpected ally. Henri arrived earlier than usual, intercepting our entomologist in the garden. The young man's face showed the strain of weeks of worry. "I need to speak with you privately," Henri said urgently. "I've been making inquiries. Madame Moreau's family, they didn't just lose their apothecary shops. Her father was accused of selling contaminated medicines, though never proven. Several customers became mysteriously ill." They walked toward the olive grove, away from potentially listening ears. Henri continued, "There's more. I learned that Madame Moreau inquired about positions with 3 other families last year, before Celeste and I became engaged. All suddenly withdrew their interest when our engagement was announced. She knew she'd lose her position once Celeste married. Exactly. 20 years she's been here, since Celeste's mother died in childbirth. She's not just a governess. She's been mother, teacher, confidant. The thought of Celeste leaving," Henri's hands clenched. "We need proof. Monsieur Beaumont won't believe mere suspicion, especially against someone he trusts so completely." Our entomologist considered carefully. "Tonight, can you ensure Madame Moreau is occupied? Perhaps a message requiring her presence downstairs at precisely 10:45? Henri nodded grimly. "I'll manage it." That evening unfolded with the tension of a held breath. Dinner conversation felt stilted, everyone aware of undercurrents but unable to name them. Celeste didn't appear, too weak now to leave her bed. Madame Moreau excused herself early, citing the need to prepare the patient's evening medications. At 10:30, our entomologist positioned himself in an alcove near Celeste's room. He heard Madame Moreau inside, her voice soothing as she administered what she called remedies for peaceful sleep. Then Henri's plan activated. A servant appeared, urgently requesting Madame's presence for an important message from Dr. Reynaud. The moment she descended the stairs, our entomologist slipped into Celeste's room. The young woman lay still, already sliding toward sleep. On the nightstand sat the atomizer he'd observed, an elegant crystal bottle with a squeeze bulb. He carefully collected its contents into a vial, then replaced the liquid with plain water. As he worked, Celeste stirred slightly. "Who's there?" she whispered. "A friend," he replied softly. "Rest now. Tomorrow will be better." He left as quickly as he'd entered, passing Madame Moreau on the stairs. She looked at him sharply but said nothing. Henri's false message had clearly irritated her, and she was hurrying back to her charge. In his room, our entomologist tested the atomizer's contents. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Concentrated datura extract, enough to slowly poison anyone exposed to it night after night. He prepared his evidence methodically. The test results, his observations, the correlation between applications and moth appearances. At 11 o'clock, he watched from his window. The moths came as usual, drawing to the residue of alkaloids still lingering in the room. But without fresh application, their numbers were fewer, their gathering less frantic. The morning after replacing the poison with water brought subtle but unmistakable changes. Our entomologist, observing from the breakfast room window, saw Celeste walking in the garden, still supported by Marie, but with steadier steps than he'd witnessed since arriving. The improvement was modest, yet significant, like the first green shoots after a harsh winter. Madame Moreau noticed too. She stood on the terrace, watching her charge with an expression our entomologist couldn't quite decipher. Was it concern or calculation that creased her brow? When she caught him observing her, she approached with determined steps. "Monsieur, might I speak with you privately?" Her voice carried an edge he hadn't heard before. They walked to a corner of the garden where espaliered pear trees created natural privacy. "You were in Mademoiselle's room last night." He didn't deny it. "The moths interested me. Their behavior patterns change based on environmental factors." "And did you find what you were looking for?" The question held layers of meaning, like sediment in ancient stone. "I found enough to understand their attraction. Remarkable how nature responds to the smallest chemical signals." She studied him for a long moment. "You know, monsieur, I came to this household when I was 25. My family had just lost everything. My father's reputation destroyed. My mother dead from shame. My sisters scattered to convents or distant relatives who'd take them." Her voice remained steady, but her hands twisted together. "Monsieur Beaumont offered me not just employment, but dignity, purpose, a child to raise. And you raised her well. I gave her everything. Education, culture, affection. Her father was too busy to provide. When she had nightmares, I held her. When she struggled with Latin, I spent entire nights helping her understand. When her monthly courses began and she was terrified, She stopped, composing herself. 20 years, monsieur. She is not my employer's daughter anymore. She is mine." Our entomologist watched a bee navigate the pear blossoms, considering his words carefully. "Yet children grow. They leave. It's the natural order." "Natural?" She laughed bitterly. "What's natural about her marrying that boy, moving to his family's estate, bearing children that will weaken her already delicate constitution? She doesn't know what marriage truly means, the subjugation, the loss of self." "Perhaps that's her choice to make." "Choices?" Madame Moreau's dark eyes flashed. "What choices did I have? What choices do women like us ever have? We serve, we sacrifice, we're discarded when no longer useful." She paused, seeming to realize she'd revealed too much. "Forgive me. The strain of Celeste's illness has affected my composure." That afternoon, our entomologist sought out old Jacques, finding him in the tool shed, sharpening pruning shears with methodical strokes. The groundskeeper looked up, his ancient face knowing. "She's walking better today, the young mistress," Jacques observed. "First time in weeks she made it to the fountain." "You've known Madame Moreau for 20 years. What was she like when she arrived?" Jacques considered, his hands never stopping their work. "Proud, despite her circumstances. Educated above her station now. She'd quote Virgil while teaching the child, discuss Voltaire at dinner when permitted. The late Madame's friends thought it inappropriate, but Monsieur Beaumont valued education." "And her relationship with Celeste?" "Devoted. Perhaps too much so." She dismissed nursemaids who grew too familiar, governesses who might compete for affection. By the time Mademoiselle was 10, Madame Moreau had made herself indispensable. He tested the blade's sharpness against his thumb. "You know what happens to fruit trees that aren't pruned? They grow wild, tangled, stop bearing properly. Sometimes love is like that too." Dr. Renaud arrived for his afternoon visit, and our entomologist arranged to be present during the examination. Celeste sat up in bed, her color noticeably improved, though she remained weak. The physician checked her pulse, examined her eyes, listened to her breathing with his stethoscope. "Remarkable," he murmured. "The tremor has decreased, and your pupils are more responsive. What changed?" "I slept better," Celeste offered. The moths didn't disturb me as much. Madame Moreau, standing by the door, interjected quickly. I adjusted her evening tisane. Perhaps the new mixture is more effective. Whatever you're doing, continue it, Reynaud said, packing his instruments. This is the first real improvement I've seen. After the doctor left, our entomologist lingered, pretending to examine the window frame for gaps. Celeste watched him with eyes that seemed clearer than they'd been since his arrival. "You're not really here just for Uncle's butterflies, are you?" she asked suddenly. He turned, surprised by her directness. "What makes you say that?" "You observe everything except the specimens. You watch us like we're the collection." She pulled her shawl closer. "I'm not as confused as everyone thinks. The illness, it clouds things, but I notice patterns too. Madame Moreau's evening rituals. The moths arriving precisely when she leaves, how much worse I feel after her special treatments." "Have you spoken to anyone about these observations?" "Who would believe me?" "A hysterical girl suffering from nervous exhaustion," she smiled sadly. "That's what they whisper, you know, that I'm afraid of marriage, that my mind is creating illness to avoid my duties." The evidence lay arranged on our entomologist's makeshift laboratory table like specimens prepared for classification. The vial of datura extract from the atomizer, his test results showing alkaloid concentrations, pressed samples from the greenhouse plants with harvest marks, and most damning, the detailed timeline correlating Celeste's symptoms with the nightly applications. Science had provided what suspicion alone could not. Proof methodical and undeniable. He chose his moment with care. At 4 o'clock, when the household settled into its afternoon lull, he found Madame Moreau in the greenhouse, carefully tending her poisonous garden. She didn't look up as he entered, though surely she heard his footsteps on the gravel path. "The datura is flowering beautifully," she said conversationally, touching a white trumpet bloom with familiar tenderness. "Did you know that in India they call it the sacred thorn apple? Devotees of Shiva use it to induce visions. And here in Provence, what do they use it for?" She finally turned to face him, her dark eyes steady. "You already know the answer to that, don't you? You've been quite thorough in your investigations." Our entomologist placed the vial of extracted poison on the potting bench between them. "This came from the atomizer you use in Mademoiselle's room. The concentration is sufficient to cause gradual poisoning, weakness, tremors, visual disturbances, everything Dr. Reynaud couldn't explain." "Proof means nothing without context," she replied calmly. "I could say this was medicine, improperly prepared perhaps, an error in dilution. Who would believe otherwise?" A respected governess of 20 years against a visiting scholar who's been here less than a week? The improvement in Celeste's condition since I replaced your poison with water might suggest otherwise. For the first time, genuine emotion cracked her composed facade. Poison. Such an ugly word for something that was keeping her safe. You don't understand what that family has planned for her. The Durans need an heir, preferably several. They see Celeste as breeding stock, nothing more. That's not your decision to make, isn't it? Her voice rose slightly. Then she caught herself, glancing toward the house. 20 years I've protected her, educated her, loved her more than any blood relation ever did. Her father barely knows her favorite color. Henri sees her as a beautiful ornament for his modern ambitions. But I know every nightmare she's ever had, every book that made her cry, every hope she's whispered in the dark. Our entomologist studied this woman who had twisted love into possession, devotion into control. You're right that you know her well. But did you know she's been aware of what you're doing? She notices the patterns, your evening visits, the moths, how much worse she feels after your treatments. Madame Moreau's face paled. That's impossible. The datura causes confusion, memory lapses, not enough to completely cloud an intelligent mind. She's been fighting you, madame, even if she didn't fully understand what she was fighting against. The governess sank onto a wooden stool, suddenly looking older than her 45 years. Everything I built, everything I sacrificed, it was all for her. When my family fell, I had nothing. No dowry, no prospects, no future except servitude. But with Celeste, I had purpose. I was needed. Essential. And when she married, you would lose that purpose. I would lose everything. The words came out raw, desperate. Do you understand what happens to governesses when their charges no longer need them? We're given a small pension if we're fortunate, a letter of recommendation, and sent away like furniture no longer fashionable. Where would I go? Another family, another child to raise and love and lose. Our entomologist felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for this woman whose fear of abandonment had driven her to such extremes. Yet sympathy couldn't excuse the systematic poisoning of an innocent girl. There are other paths, madame. Your knowledge of botanical medicine, properly applied, could what? Allow me to open a shop? With what funds? Work in a hospital? They don't employ women except as nurses, and I'm too old to start such training. She stood, straightening her spine with visible effort. I assume you intend to expose me. I intend to ensure Celeste's recovery. How that happens depends on you. She walked to the datura plants, touching their leaves one final time. You know, these plants are also called moonflowers. They bloom at night, releasing their strongest fragrance in darkness, rather like secrets, don't you think? Most powerful when hidden. But dawn always comes, madame. Secrets rarely stay buried forever. That evening, tension filled the dining room like smoke from a poorly tended fire. Henri had arrived, sensing perhaps that matters were reaching a crisis. Monsieur Beaumont seemed preoccupied, pushing food around his plate without eating. Even Dr. Reynaud appeared subdued, though he mentioned again Celeste's improvement. After dinner, our entomologist requested a private audience with Beaumont in his study. The older man listened in growing disbelief as the evidence was presented, each piece building an undeniable case. His face progressed through stages: shock, denial, anger, and finally a terrible understanding. 20 years, he said quietly, staring at the vial of poison. I trusted her with my daughter's life for 20 years. She believed she was protecting Celeste in her own distorted way. Protecting? Beaumont's voice hardened. She nearly killed her. The doses were carefully calculated to weaken, not kill. Madame Moreau's knowledge of botanical medicine is extensive. She knew exactly how much to administer to create dependence without fatal consequences. The morning of Madame Moreau's departure dawned gray and still, as if nature itself held its breath. Our entomologist watched from his window as a modest carriage drew up to the servants' entrance. No grand dismissal, no public scandal, just a quiet severance negotiated through the night. Monsieur Beaumont had been persuaded, with difficulty, to provide a modest pension and a letter of recommendation that mentioned only personal circumstances requiring relocation. She doesn't deserve such mercy, Henri had argued fiercely during the late-night conference. But Beaumont, aged by the revelation, had decided otherwise. 20 years of service, whatever her final transgressions, cannot be entirely erased. And Celeste, she needs to heal without the poison of a public trial. Our entomologist descended to find Madame Moreau in the entrance hall, 2 small trunks containing her entire life at Chateau Lavande. She wore the same severe black dress she'd worn upon his arrival, but something fundamental had changed. The rigid authority had dissolved, leaving a middle-aged woman facing an uncertain future. "I suppose you think yourself heroic," she said without rancor, adjusting her gloves with mechanical precision. "I think myself observant, nothing more." She studied him for a long moment. "You lost someone, didn't you? It's in how you watch others. Like you're cataloging happiness you can no longer touch." He didn't answer, but perhaps his silence was confirmation enough. "Then you understand," she continued, "what it means to have your entire world contained in one person. The difference is, death took yours. I was trying to prevent life from taking mine." Before he could respond, footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Celeste appeared, still pale but walking unassisted, her determination evident in every careful step. Madame Moreau's composure finally cracked, tears gathering in her eyes. "My dear child." "I'm not a child," Celeste interrupted gently but firmly. "I haven't been for years. That was the one thing you could never see. Everything I did was for you, Madame, not for me." Celeste's voice held sadness rather than anger. "You taught me to read, to think, to question. But when I began to use those skills to choose my own path, you tried to close every door." The 2 women stood facing each other, 20 years of complicated love between them. Finally, Celeste stepped forward and kissed Madame Moreau's cheek, a gesture of farewell that acknowledged both affection and betrayal. "Where will you go?" Celeste asked. "Lyon. I have a cousin there who manages a boarding house. She's offered me a position helping with accounts and supervising the housemaids." Madame Moreau attempted a smile. "Perhaps it's time I learned to live without." The carriage driver appeared in the doorway. Madame Moreau gathered her dignity like armor and walked out without looking back. They watched the carriage disappear down the drive, swallowed by the morning mist. Over the following days, the chateau transformed. Windows were thrown open, heavy curtains drawn back, the oppressive atmosphere of illness replaced by tentative renewal. Celeste grew stronger with each passing day, the accumulation of poison gradually leaving her system. Dr. Reynaud visited daily, amazed by her recovery, but accepting the explanation of misidentified botanical contamination without deeper inquiry. Our entomologist completed his cataloging with renewed focus. The collection, properly documented, proved even more valuable than expected. Several specimens were species new to science, requiring detailed descriptions for the academic community. He found refuge in this meticulous work, a counterpoint to the human drama that had unfolded around him. One afternoon, while preparing specimens for shipment to the museum in Marseille, Celeste joined him in the collection room. She moved slowly but steadily, color returning to her cheeks like dawn breaking. "Papa says you're leaving soon." "My work here is complete. The collection is catalogued, arrangements made for its donation." She examined a case of brilliant blue morphos, their wings catching the light. "These traveled thousands of miles to end up preserved under glass. Do you think they mind?" I think, our entomologist said carefully, that preservation serves a purpose. These specimens will teach future generations, inspire young naturalists, contribute to our understanding of the natural world. But they'll never fly again. No, he agreed. That's the price of knowledge sometimes. We pin down beauty to understand it, but in doing so, we change its fundamental nature. Celeste looked at him directly then, her intelligence fully restored. Is that what Madame Moreau was trying to do? Pin me down to keep me? Perhaps. Love and possession can look remarkably similar until you examine them closely. Henri arrived that evening for dinner, the first truly celebratory meal since our entomologist's arrival.
Wedding plans were discussed with renewed enthusiasm. July 15th remained the date. The Durand family estate prepared for a new mistress. Monsieur Beaumont seemed to have aged years in days, but also somehow lightened, as if releasing a burden he hadn't known he carried. "We owe you more than can be repaid," Beaumont said, raising his glass to our entomologist. "Without your intervention—" "Without my moths, you mean," our scholar corrected with dry humor. "They were the true detectives, drawn infallibly to the source of poison. I merely interpreted their message." 3 weeks had passed since Madame Moreau's departure, and the June morning that marked our entomologist's final day at Chateau Lavande arrived with the peculiar brightness that Provence reserves for moments of transition. His trunks stood ready in the entrance hall, considerably heavier than when he'd arrived. Monsieur Beaumont had insisted on gifting him several rare specimens from the collection, including a perfect pair of the lunar moths that had been so central to uncovering the truth. He took one last walk through the gardens, now approaching their full summer glory. The lavender was beginning to bloom, purple spikes emerging like hope after a long winter. Old Jacques was pruning roses, his ancient hands steady despite their gnarled appearance. "So you're leaving us, monsieur," the groundskeeper said without looking up. "Back to your Paris and your university." "Back to my work, yes." Jacques straightened, his back protesting audibly. "You did good here. Not just the cataloging, the other matter, though I wonder if you've considered what you've set in motion." "Mademoiselle Celeste will recover fully. She'll marry Henri. They'll be happy." "Perhaps. Or perhaps she'll discover that freedom from one cage simply means entering another, even if the bars are gilded." The old man returned to his roses. "But then, that's not your concern anymore, is it?" Our entomologist found no ready answer. He continued to the greenhouse, where the exotic plants still thrived, despite their mistress's absence. The datura plants remained, beautiful and deadly, their white flowers open to the morning sun. Someone, Henri perhaps, had suggested destroying them, but Celeste had intervened. "They're not evil," she'd said. "They're simply what they are." The evil was in how they were used. In the collection room, now properly organized with his careful labels and documentation, he found Celeste herself. She stood before a case of Chinese silk moths, their pale wings reminiscent of the lunar moths that had haunted her windows. "I wanted to thank you before you left," she said, turning to face him. The past weeks had restored much of her vitality. Her hair shone again, her movements had regained their grace, though a certain thoughtfulness had replaced her previous innocence. "No thanks are necessary. I was hired to catalog a collection." She smiled at that, an expression both sad and knowing. Is that what you tell yourself? That you were simply doing your job? We all tell ourselves stories to make sense of our actions. Yes, she agreed. Madame Moreau told herself she was protecting me. Papa tells himself he was providing the best care. Henri tells himself our marriage will be a modern partnership of equals. She paused, studying a moth's delicate antennae. What story do you tell yourself? Our entomologist considered the question. That understanding the natural world helps us understand ourselves. That classification and observation can solve human problems as readily as scientific ones. And is that true? Sometimes, not always. Humans are considerably more complex than insects. Celeste moved to the window, looking out over the estate that would soon no longer be her home. I received a letter yesterday from Leon. Our entomologist waited, knowing she would continue. Madame Moreau writes that she's settled into her new position. She manages the boarding house accounts and supervises 3 housemaids. She says she's learning to appreciate efficiency over affection. Celeste's voice carried no bitterness, only a kind of wondering sadness. 20 years she shaped me, and now we're strangers. Perhaps that's as it should be. Butterflies don't return to their chrysalises. No, but do they ever forget they were once caterpillars? The question hung between them, unanswerable. A knock at the door interrupted their philosophy. Henri come to say farewell. He shook our entomologist's hand with genuine warmth. I hope you'll return for the wedding, he said. July 15th, as planned. I'm afraid my schedule won't permit it, but I wish you both happiness. The journey to the station passed through the same landscape that had greeted him weeks ago, but our entomologist saw it differently now. The neat rows of lavender spoke not just of agriculture, but of human attempts to impose order on nature's chaos. The limestone hills, ancient and patient, had witnessed countless small dramas like the one at Chateau Lavande. Love twisted into possession, fear disguised as protection, the eternal struggle between holding on and letting go. At the station, Monsieur Beaumont waited to see him off personally, a gesture of respect that transcended their social divide. You've taught me something, Beaumont said as they waited for the train. I thought I was protecting my daughter by surrounding her with trusted servants, proven remedies, familiar walls. But protection can become prison, can't it? Most things taken to extremes become their opposite. The train arrived with its usual theatrical clouds of steam and mechanical protest. As our entomologist settled into his compartment, he opened the case containing the gifted specimens. The lunar moths lay there, pinned and perfect, their white wings forever frozen in silent flight. He thought of Celeste's question. Did they mind being preserved? The train pulled away from Chateau Lavande, carrying him back toward Paris, toward his empty apartment and his university position, and his orderly life of classification and observation. In his pocket he found something unexpected, a small envelope he hadn't noticed being placed there. Inside, a pressed sprig of lavender, and a note in Celeste's hand. For remembrance and for forgetting, both have their season. Months later, in the gray depths of a Parisian winter, another letter would arrive. The wedding had been beautiful, Celeste wrote. The lavender had been in full bloom, the air sweet with its perfume. She was learning to manage a vineyard household, to be a wife, to navigate her new freedoms and restrictions. She was painting again, Enclosed was a small watercolor of a Luna moth, wings spread against a night sky. "I think of them sometimes," her letter concluded. "Those moths at my window. They were trying to reach something they could sense but couldn't understand, drawn by instinct toward what might nourish or might poison them. Perhaps we're all like that, drawn toward what we cannot fully comprehend, hoping for sustenance, risking destruction.
But still, we fly toward the light, or what we mistake for light, again and again." Our entomologist pinned the watercolor above his desk, where it would remain for years to come, a reminder that some mysteries weren't meant to be catalogued, that human nature resisted classification, and that sometimes the most profound discoveries came not from what we preserved under glass, but from what we chose to set free.